Horizon TV, the beacon for the nation.
The government proposal to increase the fuel rates in the country has irked many people, including the players in the various sectors, the matatu industry and the Kenya Motorist Association. And yesterday they planned to do a major protest in major highways in Kenya, but it didn't take off. Today we are discussing the impact of the fuel cost on the lives of Kenyans. And with me on the studio is governance expert Bernard Wakoli, and Simba Caleb.
Thank you.
Welcome to the show.
Welcome.
And if I start with you, I'm sure you are aware of the plan by the government to increase fuel price by the 1st of September.
Yes.
And yesterday, the Motorist Association of Kenya planned a protest rally where they told their members and the general public to leave their cars at home or park in major highways.
Yes.
But it failed to take off. Why do you think so?
Thank you very much for having me on the studio. And from your question, I think most motorists in Kenya are middle class. And like in developed democracies, you will see the same thing happened in countries like Germany, where we saw videos or rather photos of motorists leaving their vehicles on the road, and it succeeded. But in Kenya, because of this, middle class kind of people feel they can't do anything or they can't be mobilized over course. They feel it's not their duty to they live in a comfort zone somewhere. So it becomes very difficult to mobilize them to action. If it were involving the civil society, the people, the likes of Kina Boniface Mwangi, to mobilize citizens, it would have to some extent succeeded, but not really with the private motorists, because everybody is concerned about his own issues.
Private motorists aside, the Matatu Owners Association faulted the Kenya Motorist Association for organizing this strike. Yeah, and they said they will find other alternatives, but it will still pass the cost to Kenyans.
Yeah. The strike was not well inclusive. They left out so many stakeholders, like matatu owners. Matatus are so many in this country. At least when you look at the vehicles on our roads, you can't fail to see a matatu. So it was very bad for them to not involve the Matatu Owners Association. And the Matatu Owners Association, as much as they control most of our public service, they also pass that cost of the increment in the oil or in the fuel to the customers, who are the people who use public service. And who are these people who use public service?
Common
mwananchi. So as much as Matatu Owners Association feel there is not appropriate for government to increase the cost, but at the end of the day, they will pass over the cost to the common mwananchi.
Now, Caleb, if I come to you, we are talking about a situation whereby the government decided to increase the fuel rates. Now, increasing the fuel rates, of course, affects so many things in life, including the electricity cost, the manufacturing cost, and we are talking of the big four agenda. Which one of them is manufacturing? How do you relate to that?
Let me first there's something I want to talk about what is just said.
Yes.
The problem in Kenya is not who was left out. The problem in Kenya is conflict of interest. Majority of, for example, the owners of these big circles, for example, in matatus, are the ones who run the fuel industry. The people who run the fuel industry are the ones who want to ruin the industry, because what they want is more money for themselves. You see, they make a big kill from fuel industry that they make from motor vehicles, which fuel is consumed by literally everybody in this country. So what they do, but they will not want you, one or two people, to destroy a good kill they're obviously seeing. So unless, the problem with Kenya is lack of discipline.
Yes.
lack of discipline, and people are just selfish. So that's what the problem is. So if you were to have that, we have got a streamlined way of doing business in Kenya, you not have conflict of interest. So subsequently, what will happen is that today, if we call for a major strike, everybody will come out. But you see today, I'm a private motorist, right? I'm driving my Brado. You tell me to leave it at Jogo Road. Guys will come and break inside, and then they steal everything. So this is just fast. We are just an insecure country. We are never genuine with ourselves. The system doesn't work. We are not genuine people. So such a strike cannot see the end, the right at the end of the tunnel. Yes. So coming back to the question that you asked me, you know, fuel in Kenya controls literally everything. The other day, I'm used to a postpaid system of electricity where I live. So since I relocated to Nairobi, I moved to a new system that uses a prepaid. So I bought a 500 shillings token, then they gave me a breakdown. So a 500 shillings through M-Pesa, so there's a breakdown that has got very many components. So the one for tokens, 500 was reduced to 336 shillings. So one of those items is fuel. So fuel for 500 shilling token that's supposed to be 500 took around 56 shillings, yes. Fuel alone.
Yes.
So look at that. And then look at production. Preparation of bread, these guys use fuel. Preparation, processing of salt, processing of sugar, even if it has mercury. So literally everything. So it means when these guys increase the cost of fuel, what they want to do is they want to reintroduce and double VAT indirectly. That's what they're doing. Because, you know, remember they said we have a big portion of our budget that is not, they don't know where it's it. It's not in the donor side, it's not from the taxpayers, it's just silent. And you know, these are some of the things we are saying, that Kenyan parliament, as it is today, the third parliament, they have lost the election, they don't know where they come from, and they don't know where they're going. Because you cannot have an item in a budget item that it's not explained.
Yes,
where is it going to come from? So what government is doing is that they're looking at that. So the best thing is, because if they say, again, we increase VAT from, for instance, 16 to 50, people will walk out of the streets, and then it will be like a resistance. Like that.
Now, Bernard, coming back to you, and we are talking of increase of fuel cost. As Caleb said, it literally affects everything.
Affects everything.
And you know very well that we have something called the 4 big agenda, of which one of them is manufacturing.
Yeah.
Now, if we want to promote manufacturing, and yes, we are we're increasing the cost of production, what's the correlation, and how do you think, how genuine is this 4 big agenda? Yeah,
first, I think the government is doing what it can do best to ensure that it gets funds for this big 4 agenda. And from my history, from what I've read, there's no country in the world that has developed through taxation or over-taxation of its citizens. Even when you look at the developed democracies like the US and Europe, okay, they tax. They tax very well, but citizens can account. You know, there's a system of accountability. There's service delivery. You know, the public takes everything. There are parks where children go to play. There, you know, everything.
They get value for their taxes.
You get value for your taxes. But in Kenya, we have a system where they want to overtax you, but at the end of the day, you don't see the services. Look at Caleb has just talked about matatu industry. Look at how it's being run. You know, it's supposed to be public service, but it's not longer public service, because a person will rather use his private vehicle coming to town or going to his work rather than using public transport. If this system is well maintained, is well streamlined, I will not be bothering
and
to,
how can that
to
be
drive
done?
It's just putting the system in place. We had the other day vehicles coming in from NYS. We had buses. They were showcased here around 50 or something. And the government said they are going to increase those buses to accommodate the larger part of the Nairobians. In fact, they went ahead to have a lane on Thika Superhighway,
yes,
where they said this will only be for those buses.
And that was
then
it.
What happened?
And that was it.
We don't see them anymore. So the question Kenyans should be asking the minister in charge of transport, what happened with the buses that you promised us? You know, if the government takes over the transport system, we're not going to see this chaos around. And for the government to fund Big Four agenda, it must have come from the budget, the way Caleb is saying. Because you can't come up with this humongous kind of program, which are good, yes, but my advice to the president would have been, identify one agenda. If it is industrialization, how would you reduce the cost of production? And the cost of production in this country is about fuel. You know, you can't talk about industrialization and you increase fuel, which will replicate to everything that Kenyans work on, as in it controls every part of the system.
Yes.
So it's appropriate for the government to ensure that the cost of production goes down so that they can attract investors. And fuel, just to contradict on what Caleb said, fuel in this country mainly is run by multinationals. You get Kenya has NOC, National Oil Corporation, which is a state agency.
Yes.
But government institutions are forced to buy oil from Shell,
Why?
which is a corporate. You know, Shell is the most, is the supply of oil to even security agencies like our defense forces,
yes,
Kenya Police. They are the people who supply oil to those institutions. Then you ask yourself, why does a government has a corporation, which is a government corporation, then buy oil from,
yes,
then we start now talking about that's when now corruption comes in.
Now, if I come, Caleb, of course, the fuel affects everything, we know, but here is a component of fuel that is used by majority of Kenyans, especially in the rural areas. And as we know, the cost of fuel will increase by 17 shillings. And I'm talking about kerosene. How do you think the impact of that will be to those people who use kerosene, especially in the rural areas?
You see, I actually I did not want to speak about the Big Four agenda deliberately because I know it's a hoax. It's, yes, a fallacy. It cannot work in Kenya. It's not practical. It's a political fallacy.
Why do you say so?
It was given during political campaigns, and we know in Kenya anything that is given during political campaigns. Because let me tell you one thing. I am of a scientific background. When, for instance, if we say today we want to add a drug, for example, to treat tuberculosis, that drug, a research must have been done, a background given about that drug within a very long period of time. And then these patients must have been put within that long period of time on this treatment. And then they say, now, what is the outcome? Trials are done, then these things are not given out. But somebody comes in a political rally, tells you, Big Four agenda. And then suddenly, after 6 months, everybody wants to talk about big agenda. You want to make a budget, at the streamline, it's using the Big Four agenda. You want to organize a conference, streamline, said that it's in line with the Big Four agenda. That is, it's dead on arrival, it's a political rhetoric, it will go. So coming back to what we are saying here, this is the thing. Kenyans are overtaxed. I was watching a conversation the other day in Tanzanian Parliament. Let me tell you, the cost of, for example, sugar. The cost of sugar. Kenyans actually are closing borders to Tanzania to want to buy, for example, things like sugar. Because number one, sugar in Kenya is very much expensive. Number two, it's contaminated. Number three, the sugars, cane millers in Kenya, for instance, are not even supplying sugar to the market. So the sugar we have in Kenya is the one that is contaminated. So Kenyans who are already overtaxed, again, you want again to overtax them more. What will happen in coming days is that Kenyans will get tired. And when they get tired, they recall rungus and arrows. then they turn against the rich, those who have got, those who drive cars in their villages, government officials, so they turn against you, and then you can guess what will
Kenyans
happen.
really tired, we will know that. And we're going for a short break, but as you know, we're also live on our social media. That's Facebook, Horizon TV Kenya, Twitter at Horizon TV Kenya, myself at Ahmed Qadar1. What's your Twitter handle?
Caleb_Simba.
Wakoli Ben.
Wakoli Ben himself. Keep it there. This is an interesting conversation, but we will come back and continue the conversation.
Horizon TV, the beacon for the nation.
Welcome back to the show, The Weekly Matters, your favorite show. I'm your host, Ahmed Qadar. And with me is Bernard Wakoli and Caleb Simba. We're talking about, the cost of fuel in this country and how it's increasing and the impact it has on the livelihood of Kenyans. Bernard, to continue the conversation, the VAT on fuel is coming back after 5 years suspension. It has been there 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And some are saying it's forced by IMF and the government. It's a mode of
Internal revenue
collection. Do you think, about 10 years ago, about 5 years ago, when Kibaki retired, he literally chased the IMF and the World Bank from town. And they seem to be coming. Where are we missing?
When Kibaki took over the leadership of this country in 2002, the country was in big debt. But for the 5 years that Kibaki was the Grand Coalition, Kibaki managed to streamline the economy of this country to a level where the country was able to sustain itself economically. And during that period, we didn't hear any complaint of a previous regime. We didn't hear, Kibaki never complained about Moi. He settled
despite him being there for 24 years.
Yes, and he worked. Yes. The only person who mentioned about Moi was Kraitu Murungi. And what did he say? He said, let Moi go to herd his cattle and see how the government is run.
Yes.
That was the only statement in reference to the previous regime.
And they prove it.
And, Kibaki worked to the extent that the country was able to stand on its own. The GDP had grown. It was almost on double digit. But the conflict we had in 2007-2008 brought back the country, the gains that had been gained during the first term of Kibaki. So we had to start afresh. So what we are doing now, and the first regime, the first 5 years of the Ruto government, they were supposed to build on what Kibaki, the foundation on what Kibaki had done. But they went on to start complaining about the previous regime, what they had not done, what we want to do. And they came up with a very amorphous kind of structure. Talking about stadiums, talking about I don't know what, and in all the promises they did in 2013, nothing has been accomplished. When you look at the railway, the SGR, that was a dream project by the Grand Coalition. So literally, for the Ruto government, you can't say this is what they started, this is what they promised, and this is what they have done. Because they keep on, living in a campaign mood. Like the Big Four agenda, to me, is just a campaign mood. Because if you talk about providing housing to all citizens, then you go ahead, when you looked at the Rotich budget proposal, they are proposing to start deducting compulsory deduction from employees for housing, kind of thing. Now, when you look at that money, how will I benefit? You know, they want to put it at a level where it's like NSSF, NHIF, and when you compare the two programs or the three programs, this housing program that Rotich proposed, it doesn't like benefit somebody like me, because I have my kind of a house that I need to live in. So how will government say we are deducting you to provide a housing? Who told them I need a house to be provided by the government? So there's a way the government should come up, and the way Caleb said, this big 4 agenda, I don't see any one of them being accomplished within the remaining 4 years. You know, 1 year is already done.
Yes.
So we are now 4 years, and by next year we will be entering into campaign season. Campaign season. And by the end of the day, Urut will go home, or Uhuru will go home without accomplishing any of their promises. Where are the laptops? People are asking.
Now, if
such kind of things.
Yes, sorry for if you literally dismiss the Big Four agenda, and Bernard has raised fundamental issues regarding that. But why I will still insist on asking this question: why do you think the Big Four agenda, and considering the rise of the fuel cost and manufacturing, why do you say it's a fallacy?
It's a fallacy because it has not been tried and tested. It was a political declaration. You know, political declarations, even wars. In the United States, if America wants to go to war, the president walks to Oval Office. He walks to the Oval Office to make a presentation that has been done by military powerful personnel who are in every corner of the world. And he will go through this declaration, and it says there is a threat in this country, and that threatens the sovereignty of the United States. It's enough that now America can go to war. But you see, somebody wakes up in the morning and then he's going to Garissa in a chopper because he wants Somalis to vote for him. He tell you, I'm going to build a stadium here tomorrow. And then suddenly, after 6 months, he develops some sort of amnesia. So you ask him today, he say he has no answer to this. And you see, because Kenyans have been tolerating this thing for long, let me tell you one thing. Kibaki did little nothing to this country. The only thing, the reason as to why you want to say you saw something in Kibaki is that he tried to control the political temperatures in this country. And you know that's what Uhuru is trying to do. Because remember when NAC government came to power, because all tribes had come together, there was a research that was done by someone in Europe. They said that Kenyans were the happiest people in the world.
2 or 3 were declared
simply because you look at it, you see your Somali Pharaoh there, look at the Isima Kisi Pharaoh, they look at this Luya Pharaoh there. So that is what motivates Kenyans. But this is what any serious person who wants to change this country, this is what he needs to do. Come into office, address historical injustices. You saw what happened in Malaysia the other day. The president leaves office, you make a set economic mistakes, you thrown to jail. That's the only way you can streamline this country. You cannot have a person like Moi who literally stole everything from this country. He's still enjoying his retirement with his children, and you say, let's just assume that, let's build our economy. How?
Okay, how? Wow.
Issues of historical injustice.
Yes, Bernard.
But again, yes. I'll be devil's advocate.
Yes.
For the first 5 years,
yes,
Kibaki tried.
Yes.
Let's give him credit.
Yes.
Apart from the temperatures that yes. came after 2007, yes. 2008, he tried. And wherever he is, you know, during that period,
I think he's remembered better than the previous.
Yeah, he's remembered. You know, when you look at super thick super highway, you know,
at least you're not told to go to a bottle to know what gets been.
Yeah, at least there, Caleb. Yes. Let's give him credit.
Yes, yes.
The old man tried. Then he also came up with issues of controlling the upside of corruption, which has resurrected during Uhuru's time. And at this time, when we talk about slaying the dragon of corruption, I want to say that we don't just need to see arrests. Yes. What we are waiting to see is a landmark, and I mean landmark conviction of a serious government official
Yes.
being jailed for 10 years,
Yes.
20 years, and the recovery of the assets.
If I just take just to enhance your point, talking of corruption,
Yes.
there was a survey that was released yesterday by Ipsos. Who is the most corrupt? Who is the second? Who is the least? And there's a very emotive debate around that.
I'm also not
opinion poll.
The outcome.
What is your personal view on that opinion poll?
I think for me, I didn't agree with what Tom Wolf was talking about scientifically. When you look at when he came to address the media, and I remember by the time he was doing that, I was in another media house and we were doing the analysis of the same. And Tom Wolf started by saying that he wanted to give corruption index. When you talk of corruption index, you are talking about research figures. Caleb is a scientist. He can give you analysis of what an index is or indices. But in his speech, he started now talking of corruption perception. Perception is what you feel. What he was just saying is what Kenyans think and what everybody, if you ask anybody on the street, will think.
But
it's not scientifically proven that, and you know, when I looked at the sample size of 2,000 divided by how many constituencies we have?
290.
290.
Yes.
You are talking about 6 people per constituency.
Yes.
So how did he identify, or how was his research and the framing of the question also? Because if you ask at who is the most corrupt person, the people give you what they feel.
Bernard, there are those who will argue that perception matters in the sense that they read the papers every day.
Perception matters. Ahmed, I know where you are heading.
That they know when you read in the papers, there is the naked front page scandal,
no.
and they can deduce that. No. So there are those who say perception. If today I'm asked, who do you think is corrupt?
To me, Wolf was playing politics.
Yes. Do you think he was sponsored?
He was playing politics.
Will you think he was
to some extent, you can't do something without, you can't do a survey without resources.
Yes.
How does he get funding to conduct research?
Now allow me to bring Bennett.
You asked me a question about the papers and what people read.
Yes.
The people who are mentioned, the top. Let me talk about the top 2.
Yes.
Anne Waiguru and Deputy President. If at all they are corrupt, and they have been found to be corrupt.
Yes.
We could have seen cases against them in court. But what people say, somebody will wake up today, Ahmed, and go to this building, Al Nusra Hotel, and they're saying, oh, you see that hotel? It has been bought by Ahmed. So what has been bought by so and so, and it becomes a story, it becomes a narrative that everything you see, it has been bought by Caleb. That TV belongs to Akoli, and people buy those kind of propaganda. But Ruto himself has come out and said, okay. In fact, people are saying Taj Mahal is his.
Yes.
The owner of Taj Mahal came out and said, I've never even met Ruto. I don't know where Ruto is featuring in my property. This is my property. And Ruto said, I don't own this property, So there's narrative that is being peddled around against certain individual. And to me, it's just political, because you can't say somebody is corrupt and he hasn't been subjected to a judicial process on corruption-related incidents. What we saw Ruto being prosecuted about was about land in Rift Valley, the Mteshi land, and he gave it back, after the process. So can you talk about corruption?
Let me tell you one thing.
Yes.
I've never trusted Wolf.
Yes.
And I don't think whether I'll ever trust Kenyan scientific, they're called Kenyan or opinion polls. Because this is one thing. It's like you're doing a study and you're revealing the name of participants. Because what was the idea of him mentioning names? Because the idea, let me ask a simple question that probably we'll need to ask. What was his ultimate intention for this? But let me tell you one thing. We are a country that is driven by political jargons. You see, in the recent past, the president has worked so hard to ensure that the political temperatures have gone down. But on the other side of the story, there are people who have been making a big gain out of political high temperatures. And one of those people who have nowadays missed what to talk about in political fields are guys from the Tanga movement. Like Odinga is not the field, the president is not in the political circles. So they've got nobody to accuse of having done what. So what these guys most likely did is to bring these guys here, create a story that we know that will create a controversy, boot a story for themselves, so that when it comes out, they blame the other side, which of course you don't know where, because right now, there's nobody who has declared interest to fight for the presidency. And then, because it's just themselves because they're creating a scene. This is a scene, this is a typical case of a scene that was well choreographed, thrown to the table so that they can create a subject of discussion, because Kenya is known for, Kenya is driven by political stories. So this is not something that we are actually even supposed to discuss about.
It just came us by the way, and we are going back for a break, but we are also on Facebook, Horizon TV Kenya, Twitter at Horizon TV Kenya, myself at Ahmed Qadar One. We'll be back and conclude the discussion. What an interesting topic it is today.
Horizon TV, the beacon for the nation.
Welcome back to the show. We are still continuing the discussion regarding the fuel cost increase in this country and the impact it has on the livelihood of Kenyans. If you are just joining us right now, we have two great gentlemen in the studio, Bernard Wakoli and Caleb Simba. Caleb, if I start with you again, you have talked of amnesia, people not following up on whether the government, whatever it promises. Bernard has raised a very important point where he said that sometimes back there were lanes that were dedicated to the buses the government said it will subsidize the transport cost. But months down the line, I don't know what I can say about it. Now, today there was a breaking news that the government, that the Treasury is talking to KRA to see whether they should review the increased cost that they have talked about before the date of implementation. And you have also dismissed the 4 agenda as a fallacy. So are we in a situation whereby the left doesn't know what the right is doing?
You see, I started by telling you we are a country that is governed. We are a country that is governed by people themselves who are not disciplined. We don't follow the rule of law. But most importantly, we are a country run by political declarations. This is what, now, you see, this is what happens. Moi used to sack people while on air, and then he appoints another one in office. So, since we are reactionary, what we did, we changed the law to have that thing done ceremoniously. But we forgot one other fundamental thing, is that we amend an act of parliament to suit a specific situation. Right now, the thing of increase in fuel cost is so fundamental. Instead of parliament taking it to discuss it to fully conclusion, so that we have, because these things are anchored in law, so what happens is just somebody said today, we're increasing the cost of fuel. And then, because Parliament at some point created an organization called ERC, because somebody in Parliament and then he was the chair of that committee, saw an opportunity for this relative to fit in. So they created that body. He put on his relative who didn't know what he's supposed to do. So Parliament did not define even distinct roles, and then who supervises or who oversees the function of ELC. So now this is what happens. So just one day you wake up, you increase the cost of fuel, and then now instead of Parliament taking them out the way it's supposed to be in as per the laid down procedures, And then when now you see like it's going to affect somebody politically, then say, just hold on, let Treasury discuss this thing. Since who makes laws? Is it the Treasury or Parliament?
It's Parliament.
What's the role of Treasury, which is part of executive?
Basically,
just to implement. So how again do you allow Treasury to overdo a law? Simply because this law did not originate from the right where it's supposed to originate from.
Yes.
So unless...
So are you saying basically Parliament is sleeping on the job?
Definitely. We don't have a parliament in Kenya. That's all these things are happening.
Let me bring in Bernard. Bernard, the cost of the prices of fuel already too high.
Yeah.
And increasing by 17 shillings is already brutal. And we have come back from a very prolonged electionary period, and the economy is trying to recover. How is this going to impact on the economy?
Amel, something that saddens me the most is the fact that wherever we see the cost of crude oil going down globally, in Kenya, the cost is increasing.
Yes.
So who are these cartels that are involved in oil trafficking that always want to ensure that Kenyans suffer? Especially you talked about the people who use paraffin and kerosene in my village. Yes. Because we have had this campaign of people adopting the renewable sources of energy, but it has not picked up because in the villages it's also very exorbitant by the fact that we have these cartels, all these people, traders, who loan these homesteads, those solar equipments, and start paying loan. At the end of the day, you realize that the loan they are paying is so expensive. So they would rather continue using the kerosene. Something that the government would have done if they want to caution the people who are at the lowest level of the pyramid is to ensure that since solar or renewable energy is mostly used, it can be used by these rural folks
for lighting. Going for 100 shillings, nearly 100 bob.
Yeah,
per liter.
For lighting, what I expect is the government to lower the cost of maybe importing those renewable sources of energy. So if the kerosene, according to the rate that the government is proposing, is going to cost 100, and this is somebody who doesn't have any source of income, this is somebody who is living below $1 per day, and buying even a liter is a problem to that person or that homestead. How is he or are they going to survive? So the government, as much as Uhuru is determined to generate income for his Big Four agenda, he also need to look at the burden, the tax burden. And as I've said, there's no government in the world that has overtaxed its citizens and developed. What we are doing is just like Caleb is saying, building our houses on a sand foundation, a foundation that cannot hold, a foundation that when the wind blows, it falls down. We need to have stable things that are anchored in law. Let's have regulations anchored in law so that nobody just wakes up one day and make a declaration that affects a common mwananchi who is living at the low. I pity these people so much. And they are the people who are the majority. Where I come from, industries have collapsed. They were dependent on sugar. There's no sugar. Now I went there the other day, people have grown maize.
Talking of sugar, there was a sugar report. I'm sure you'll say something about it.
Yeah. There's now sugar. People have harvested, apart from sugar, people have now harvested maize. Because when they uprooted sugarcane, they started growing maize. I can tell you a 2-kilogram tin of maize is now going at 20 shillings. You can imagine. Because people have maize in their stores, but they don't have cash to buy even vegetable to eat. They don't have cash to run, to pay, to take children to school. Parents are now exchanging maize for school fees, You can imagine. Because the industries have collapsed. And when the government increases the cost of living for this kind of people, what do you expect? A revolution, because that's what happened in France.
Okay, talking of revolution, and Caleb, here we are talking about a situation whereby a lobby group called the Kenya Motorist Association have called for a protest against the fuel rise. A section within the industry, within the transport industry, called the Matatu Owners Association, criticized their move. Yet the Matatu Owners Association, their major client are the common mwananchi. So whose interest is being fought against?
Let me tell you one thing. Even, I told you this, Kenyans are not genuine people. Even to organize a demonstration in Kenya, you have to have money. those who will come, they'll ask you, is there something? So that's what happens. You call a demo today and you don't have money, even if your idea is as good as Jesus Christ himself. It will not take place in Kenya. But if you want to succeed, you must give these guys money, because they'll tell you, man, I'm going to waste my whole day. So remember, these guys, they have families to feed. So if this matter to stout is not going to shout day in, day out from Onkwaro to town and back, and there are those who also are at the various stations, if there's no transport, they will not have money to go back to the house and then buy food for their children. The biggest problem in this country is poverty and lack of, and you know, guys are not sincere. So the sabotage capital, and you know, rich people in Kenya, because you know they've used Kenyans for a very long time, is talking of the sugar industry dying. Industries in Kenya did not start dying yesterday. They killed textile industries. Today, even toothpicks are imported from China. Matchboxes are imported. Everything in Kenya. So what they've said, what remained was things like sugar cane production from Western Kenya, because Western Kenya people were a bit tough. So they've worked so hard to ensure that they have literally killed every production industry in Kenya, so that the rich people can import stuff, because what they want to do is that they want to continue being rich and richer every day, as those who are poor continue suffering. You cannot grow an economy with imports, and that's what is happening in Kenya. So if at all we'll ever want to start talking of how to grow our economy, we need now to go back and then start discussing from the villages. To achana hii mambo ya Nairobi, go back to the villages and start discussing. Yeah.
Now, when you talked of revolution, I'm sure you come from Western Kenya.
Yes.
Just across Busia, there's something going on. Yes. And what's your take on the issue of wine and those stuff?
Ahmed, you want us to transgress again about going to issues of Uganda and coming to Kenya?
No, I just wanted to your personal view.
Yeah, I think what's happening in Uganda is very unfortunate. It's very uncalled for. And as young people, we condemn the continued torture and harassment of young politicians in Uganda in the strongest words possible. We expect Museveni to be a democratic leader, although also to some extent, having said that, you know, a coin has two sides. The other side of the coin, and from where I come from, we say sometimes the cheek goes to the ego, or ego comes to the cheek. So if there are laws within Uganda, and these people need to operate within those laws, democracy should not be abused by the opposition. Democracy entails respect of law and order. There was a by-election on which an opposition MP won, although, and the by-election was called after the killing of the previous member of parliament. So having won this election, I know the government was hit. Government was not happy for losing the election, and it blamed on opposition for inciting people not to vote.
Will move from that.
So
yes.
You know, Uganda's never had an election. What happened is that is an exercise, a correlation exercise that happens in Uganda. So it's like, you know, now Ugandans are becoming smarter than before. So they have discovered where Museveni used to get his panya roots and then get his way done. So now Museveni is coming to realize that Ugandans are outsmarting him in this game. And that is where now Museveni is on his way out anyway.
Yes.
So let the rule of democracy in Uganda.
Okay. Now, as we wind up the discussion, what is the future for the basic transport of this country for common mwananchi?
Public transport is a very important service for any
Bearing
citizen.
in mind what you just said when we were starting about the buses that were that we don't know where they ended
Public
up.
transport, to me,
Yes.
for the government to regulate and address the issues affecting public transport should be run and managed by the state. In all these developed countries, not all developed democracies, you won't see people, matatus or public transport being owned by cartels and, business people who exploit, because this is one of the main services that a government can offer, because people need to move, people need to do, ABCD. And if transport is streamlined, then I bet you that cost of living will go down, because we spend so much on our roads just because of the chaos on public transport. So I will suggest that if the government is serious about controlling public transport without corruption, then we need to have the hand of government in place. I know this can be contradicted by people who believe in free market economy.
Yes.
Because they say, okay, let government do other things, but leave business to businessmen. But for us to be where UK is, where Germany is, where, those, and for example, Ahmed, Kenya is a superpower in East Africa. It's a big country. When you see people demonstrating in Kenya because of what is happening in Uganda,
yeah, we are big.
It tells you that we are now at a level where US is, because when things happen in Kenya, you see people demonstrate in New York.
Thank you.
So we need a government that is serious on public transport.
Good. Now we are winding up, and you have 1 minute. I'm giving you 1 minute. Talking of the government regulating transport, there are several times whereby the government has talked about, matatus not coming to town, and yet things are just going the way they are. What's your take on that? I'm being told my time is up, even less than 30 seconds.
It's also a political fallacy, because it was not founded on proper background check. So if we want to discongest this city, we want to streamline this city, we must go back, we sit down, do a good fundamental research. It is tested after a period of time, then it's implemented.
Yes, let's go back to the drawing board and get things right. That's what the panelists are saying. I'm your host, Ahmed Qadar, and that is the end of our program for today. Let's do the same next Friday night. As usual, our Facebook page, Horizon TV Kenya, Twitter at Horizon TV Kenya, myself at Ahmed Qadar 1. Till then, bye.
Horizon TV, the beacon for the nation.